Welcome to the show with no name. That's right. I have no idea what to call it. Not yet. I'm working on it. I do know that we have great guests and a great topic, and that's what matters. This week, we're all about the Sununu. Yes, Waterville Valley, New Hampshire, and Gubernatorial Candidate Chris Sununu, who, a few years back, bought up the town and ski resort that feeds it. He really did pretty much buy up the town, and we'll talk about that. Chris is running for governor and fancies himself a fine leader who focuses on matters of local importance with local investors. Skills he claims are on display at Waterville Valley. Skills he will use as governor of the Granite State should we accept him at his word and vote for him in the Republican primary coming up on September 13th. Onto this buffet of Sununu sunshine comes almost literally the Shiite sandwich of unpleasant truth. No, all is not as the campaign propaganda would portend, and both of my guests this week bring the reality sandwich. Kimberly Morin is up first with a look at the Sununu's new definition of local funding. Susan Olsen follows with a more detailed investigation into what's been holding up the so-called Green Peaks expansion at Waterville Valley, her visit with the U.S. Forest Service, which actually owns the land, contracts, overdue maintenance, EPA issues, and more. And both of our guests have some thoughts on what the overall impact of Mr. Sununu's guardianship has meant to the business owners and townspeople who rely on the resort he took over for their way of life, and what that tells us about how he might serve New Hampshire should we allow him to be elevated to the role of governor of the Granite State in November. The conversation begins right after this. Hey, Steve McDonald here from GraniteRock.com, and welcome to our new trimmed down Under Construction podcast. This program doesn't have a name yet, but that's okay, because sometimes you have to start out and find yourself. And last week I declared that it was time for a change after 3.5 years of driving up to Concord every Saturday morning, after 3.5 years of planning, scheduling, producing, and recording a show that you knew as Grok Talk. I've discovered that other priorities make it necessary for me to recoup that time for other purposes. I still want to bring a conversation with local and national guests to our readers and listeners, so we vacated the space at 8 North Main Street last Monday, and now we're trying something different. This particular program is a bit shorter. We're only going to do 60 minutes to start. Most of our interviews will be over the phone, and it will eventually have a new name, because Grok Talk just really won't fit. This is something different. Besides, much the same way we use the term Grok TV as an umbrella under which we post all our video and other people's videos, Grok Talk is really more of a category of content, not a specific program. So this would be one of what could be several provided for your consumption, all under the banner of our audio podcast label, Grok Talk. Hope you'll give it a chance. I encourage you to offer suggestions on what sort of guests or programming you would like to see and what would capture your attention, or if you'd like to be a guest on the program and have a conversation with us or with me, you can email me at steve@graniterock.com. Thanks for listening. Talking to Kimberly Morin from New Hampshire PoliticalBuzz.com. You may have heard her on Girard at Large. You may have heard her on a number of different places, and I hope you read her on GraniteRock.com. She hosted an awesome article that I linked on something that Kevin Landrigan discovered. And why don't you first tell us what that was that he found, and then we'll move from there.
Last week, Kevin Landrigan shared a story from Political Pro that pointed out that Republican gubernatorial candidate Chris Sununu lied about having only local investors involved with Waterville Valley. And they just weren't any local investors. They were investors called SAFA, which is an organization. It's called SAFA Trust, and it's an organization that was formerly known as SAR Foundation. And for years, it had been investigated for Islamic terror ties, including money laundering. And that investigation was still ongoing, but ended, surprisingly, in 2009 under the Obama administration.
For those who don't know what Waterville Valley is, why don't you explain what it is and what the Sununus did?
back in 2010, Chris Sununu bought Waterville Valley. He says for under $12 million. He had never owned a ski resort before. He's never actually owned a business before, but suddenly he's going to run a ski resort. So he bought it, and he said that, again, he had all local investors. Of course, they weren't divulged, but that's what he claimed. And so they bought it in 2010 and have owned it ever since.
And the local investors and the actual purchase and operation are key points of his gubernatorial campaign, yes?
Well, he still, he talks about how he's a businessman and, running a successful business. It's not. We'll get into that. But, excuse me, how it was local. And it is, as far as we know, run locally by, him and others who actually live up there and work up there. He doesn't. But these investors are hardly local.
I would say $1 million, or started out with $750,000 in 2010. That was when they bought it, correct?
That's when they bought it. And so basically they bought it at the end of October, so they gave them $750,000 for just a few months. Yeah, and then it went up to as high as $1.1 million.
All right, and then the very next year, John H. Sununu gave a keynote speech at an event for a group called the Islamic...
Yeah, it's International Institute of Islamic Thought.
Okay, so he gives, this is almost like a Hillary Clinton thing, where you do a speech, you get a bunch of money for something, or you get a bunch of money for something and you do a speech. Strikes me as rather odd. But
Right.
IIIT is actually credited with inventing the term Islamophobia.
Yeah, and isn't it just the words Islamic thought? It rings of pushing, not trying to get people to understand Islam, but more like pushing Islamic thought is my first impression. And the thing is, they apparently have ties to the extremist Saudi Wahhabi movement, which is the Islamic extremism version of Islam that the Saudis have pushed out all across the Middle East, which is what we're seeing now. They've done this a long time ago because, Islam was in the Middle East were, mostly peaceful for a long time. And they pushed out the Wahhabi version of it, and that's where you're getting all these extremists from. I read about a long time ago. When I saw this, I was a little bit shocked. Why would anyone associate with an organization like this?
It seemed kind of odd to me that John Sununu would do a speech for these folks. And, I mean, just looking at the SAR Foundation, they have connections to Al-Qaeda, Hamas, Hezbollah, and Palestinian Islamic Jihad. If you look at the IIIT, they have connections to all sorts of bad people, the Muslim Brotherhood, everybody associated with the Muslim Brotherhood, and all these other organizations. Now, how does a former... Well, maybe you don't know the answer, maybe you can guess. How does a former chief of staff for a president of the United States find himself getting $1 million for a ski resort that his son is going to run, and then a year later giving a keynote address to these people? It's not a question you can answer, but everybody out in our audience should be asking the same question. I know that's what drove you to write your article. Why, and you said, why are these people from Virginia giving $1 million to this tiny little, ski resort in New Hampshire? What the heck is that?
Basically, well, that's the question. Why is this? It's an Islamic charity. It's set up as a 501 or one of the C's, which is why they have a Form 990, which is how someone discovered that they were even investing in Waterville Valley. Why would they give money, especially that much money, to this little hole-in-the-wall ski resort that needs a ton of work to be even upgraded, to even compete with Loon Mountain, which isn't that far away, who upgrades constantly? Why would they do that? They give money to the IIIT. They give money to these organizations that they want to, for educational purposes, etc. So it's still not explained why they would do it, other than that they're friends with John Sununu. How they're friends with John Sununu, I can't tell you.
Must be good friends, though.
Yeah, pretty damn good friends to be giving that kind of money away.
Oh yeah, I have a lot of friends, and I don't recall anybody wanting to give me $1 million. So, has the Sununu campaign responded to this news from Landrigan and, of course, your article?
Oh yeah, they made some claims like people even bring. First of all, they don't admit that they lie. I mean, they don't even bring up the fact that he lied. I'm sorry, that's huge. That shows your trustworthiness. But they said something about it's borders on racism. Apparently, Sununu doesn't realize that Islam isn't a race; it's a religion.
Nope, it really is, and he's white.
Oh, Sununu?
Yeah, he's really white.
Yeah, well, he could be red for all we know, but no, or yellow.
Yeah, that's a page out of the Left playbook right there.
Yeah, exactly. So that was his response. He deflected. Typical Democrat move. Bring up something bad to say about this. The people that are reporting on
you people.
You racist, you for daring to expose that I'm a lying liar. How dare you? Is basically what it boiled down to. He didn't really explain it, didn't say much about it, just kind of, let's move along.
So what's your next step on this story?
Well, it's not even just that part. There's other stuff in it. He's been lying about Waterville Valley this whole time. It's not a successful business. He hasn't done anything to improve it, except, suddenly, yesterday, after these stories came out, he announced that he's going to finally do improvements. Isn't that ironic?
That is, somebody should let his investors know that in order to see progress on the money that they've plunked down on Waterville Valley, they need some crazy political blogger to write a story.
Right? I mean, maybe that's what But yeah, I mean, he's done nothing to make the place better. People have been clamoring for a new slope for a long time. He made promises he was going to make one. He got approval because it's on federal land. He got approval to do it in 2013, and then apparently he didn't have the money. So instead of putting the brand spanking new quad lift he was going to put in, he's taking a lift from 1985. It's already taken down. He's going to use that lift on the new ski slope instead of buying a brand new lift.
Maybe he needs to call SAR up or the IIIT and see if they can loan him another $1 million or $2 million.
Well, he apparently got some more investors to cough up some cash to give him money to do this, supposedly, because all he's done so far is take down one symbolic tree. Seriously, that literally. I went to the Forest Service. I had some discussions and looked at all the paperwork. So they haven't done anything with it. It hasn't done much to help the town. They used to be, and part of the town's even town plan was to support Waterville Valley, make them, support them in trying to be a top quality ski resort. They're not even listed as one of the best in the East,
Well, that's pretty sad. Maybe he needs to start bilking foreign investors who want to sneak over here and get some easy access to the American way of life, kind of like our buddies over there in Vermont did.
Yeah, maybe he can get an EB-5 or something,
Right, really.
Well, rumor has it that he tried, but it just didn't quite work out.
He doesn't know enough Democrats.
Well, the thing is, here's a guy, right? Here's a guy. There's less than 300 people who live full-time in Waterville Valley. Here's a guy who can't run successfully a ski resort in a town where 300 residents depend upon him. And now he's going to run the entire Granite State where 1.3 million people are going to depend upon him.
Doesn't sound promising.
So to be fair, being in the ski industry is a tough business. It's a lot of work. You're subject to the weather, but you got to plan for that and you got to know about it. And if you don't know what you're doing, you're screwed. And didn't know what he was doing, still doesn't know what he's doing. So he's screwed, but let's not let him screw the entire state.
All right, good point. We'll close on that. Thank you very much for taking some time to talk to us.
Awesome. Thanks, Steve.
All right, thank you. We'll see ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Check out Kimberly Morin at nhpoliticalbuzz.com. And now, a creepy bumper. Yes, a creepy bumper. You get reignited when you start to change your program around a little bit, so I'm starting to make new audio, which is always fun for me. I enjoy doing it. And I came up with this creepy opening bumper that I wanted to whip on you. And I'll do that now, and right after that, we will play some audio for you from Jim Kofalt from the 603 Alliance Issues Briefing Summit. This is the MS4 EPA water regulations and how they will impact you, your property, and your property taxes. And we're going to do that right after I play this, so hang in there.
This is a test. This is only 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 a test.
All right, there you have it. Kind of a creepy bumper. So I don't know if I'm ever going to use that or not. I might just hang on to it or modify it or change it. It's a little bit on the creepy side. I'm thinking maybe I want something a little more upbeat. But since we're talking about creepy, it is time to share the wise words of Jim Kofalt on MS4 EPA water regulations. This was recorded in a large open room with fans running and people talking and doors squeaking, but you can hear his words. I just want to give you a little advance notice. It's only a couple minutes long. I edited out just about everything else except for the MS4 part. But I think it's very important, and I think you need to hear it, so take a listen.
Now, this one is a federal issue, and as a state representative, there's probably going to be little or nothing that you can do about this one. But I'm bringing it up because it is so important. It's going to drive property taxes up all over New Hampshire, and people aren't going to know why. It's important that you understand what's going on with MS4. MS4 is a permitting process, but to call it a permit process is pretty deceptive. It's like getting a permit to breathe. I can't choose not to do it. And what the permitting process is allowing in this case is if you live in a town, if you are a town government, and rain falls on your town, and you allow that rain to run into a little rivulet, which eventually ends up in a bigger stream, which eventually ends up in a lake, which eventually ends up in a river and then an ocean, you need a permit for that. So the MS4 permitting process has a number of onerous requirements. Not all cities and towns are subject to it currently. Wilton, where I live, will be subject to MS4 starting in 2017. We have already paid about $100,000 to get ready to be compliant, and the EPA estimates that most cities and towns will pay between $70,000 and $700,000 per year to comply. So it's going to drive everybody's property taxes up. Here is some of what it requires. There are extensive reporting requirements. You have to send your town employees to mandatory trainings. You will have to hire engineers to certify your plan and oversee what you're doing to make sure that you are complying. There will be increased monitoring and testing. You will need to have street sweepers come in at least twice a year and sweep your town, sweep your streets. You will have to do education and outreach programs to teach citizens how to handle their pet waste and how to properly fertilize their lawns without causing pollution. You may need to do an annual leaf pickup. Even if you live in a town where everybody rakes their leaves into the woods, you may need to do a curbside pickup of leaves once a year just to make sure everyone has that opportunity. And finally, this is the real zinger. Towns will need to change their land use regulations in order to conform with MS4. So this is what's coming from the EPA, and it's going to drive property taxes up. So one of the things you may hear is, why are my property taxes going up? There are a number of different causes. MS4 is going to be a real zinger. So look out for that.
The truly fascinating and interesting thing to understand about MS4 regulations is that they're based on the assumption that water is a pollutant. They're saying that stormwater runoff is a pollutant. Katie Tubb, writing for the Daily Signal, noted EPA finds a new pollutant, water. This is actually January 8th, 2013. According to the Environmental Protection Agency, water can be regulated as a pollutant by the authority of the Clean Water Act. Isn't that interesting? Apparently they attempted to regulate storm runoff from 495 into a creek in Virginia, and Virginia fought the basically the fines and fees and the program and the regulations and the whole deal. So through the CWA, which is the Clean Water Act, the EPA wants to levy penalties and criminal charges for discharging pollutant into navigable waters. Now let's talk about navigable waters for a second. Navigable waters include mudflats, prairie potholes, artificial ponds, and swimming pools. It most certainly also means that they can regulate stormwater runoff from your roof, driveway, roads, streets, bridges, you name it.
What's next?
The Environmental Protection Agency, New Hampshire, is very concerned about your climate. It's concerned about the climate everywhere, in all 50 states. They've recently released what they call climate fact sheets. Fact sheet. They are so concerned about your state that they have released 50 climate change fact sheets, one for every state. New Hampshire says New Hampshire's climate is changing. Most of the state has warmed 2 or 3 degrees Fahrenheit in the last century. Go! Throughout the northeastern United States, spring is arriving earlier and bringing more precipitation. Heavy rainstorms are more frequent and summers are hotter and drier. Well, there's a contradiction. Sea level is rising. Severe storms cause floods that damage property and infrastructure. Sounds pretty scary. In the coming decades, the changing climate is likely to increase flooding, harm ecosystems and winter recreation, disrupt farming, and increase some risks to human health. Alright, so the whole thing is 2 pages long. And most of it is BS. So, why? Why did the EPA do this? Well, here's the thing. The EPA does not give a rat's ass about the state of New Hampshire or any other state. They really don't care. They don't care about climate either, for that matter, except where it allows them to do what they really care about, which is accumulate power and accumulate money. The federal money is the secret. If they send out a flyer, then regional planning commissions, like-minded individuals at the state and national level can point to that and go, hey, look at that, that's a problem. See, the EPA sent it out, it must be legitimate, there's nobody there with an agenda or anything. And then they say, well, here's some money from the federal government to help us address the problems outlined in this cute little handout that we got from the EPA. So the federal money comes in, the local experts distribute the federal money, usually ineffectively after it's been pilfered and plundered on the way down. And whatever is left has all the original strings that come attached. So every single thing that the federal government would really like you to be doing at the local level, which you haven't been doing, obviously, now you will. So they're going to make you do things at the local level that you had absolutely no interest in whatsoever. A great example of this is HUD and housing money. We'll get into that later, but that's just a good example of the way they use that to control zoning, property rights, and so on. EPA's MS4 water restrictions and regulations, which we just posted a segment from the 603 Alliance Issues Briefing Summit where Jim Kofalt did an outstanding job of very quickly explaining some of the problems with property rights and property taxes related to federal land acquisition and the MS4 water restrictions. Check that out. Maybe we'll throw a little audio in there later if we have some time today. And you'll get a chance to listen to that. So the goal is to make you do things that you weren't doing, that they thought you should be doing. So it's like somebody who has been trying to tell you how to behave, and you just aren't doing that. You either don't agree, you don't see the need, you have more important priorities for your money, and your local legislators and your town councils or your selectmen or whatever agree with you. And they haven't been doing it either. So, federal money comes into the state, and of course, all your big progressives are like, well, we have to take the free money. It's free money. It's free money. It's not free money. But again, another discussion for another time. You know why it's not free money, but if you need us to describe that to you, we will do it later. The money comes with strings, rules, and regulations. So you now have to comply with those rules and regulations. You have to do what the federal government says. So they've now bypassed your
local priorities. They've bypassed your local leaders, your elected officials, your everything. And now it's controlled from Washington, D.C. And that's exactly what they want. So the entire purpose of the EPA little handout, PDF handout, is so that like-minded individuals at the local level can point to that as a reason to confuse or convince people to accept federal money that will follow it for the purpose of removing local control. It'll never make a difference. It never does. But you will be tied to that forever. Now, let's say, as an example, you decide, well, you know what? We don't like what this is doing to our property taxes or property rights or whatever your reasoning is. It's inefficient, it's ineffective, we've got a better way. And you say, we don't want the money anymore. We're not going to follow your regulations. Well, the federal government's going to say, well, we've given you X millions of dollars already. If you're not going to do what we say, you got to pay us back. Even though it's probably your money to begin with, right? Because in a state like New Hampshire, where all the really, really smart people say that we don't get all our federal tax dollars back, so in theory, let's follow this for a second. We don't get all our federal tax dollars back. So we take the federal money to get all our federal tax dollars back. But if we don't do what the feds say, it's not really our money, it's their money. Which, of course, is the reality. They've always believed it was their money to take and spend as they wanted, which, again, is the whole point. You're too stupid. You aren't going to do it right. And they want to control everything, pretty much. So, why politicize everything if you don't want to control it all? So, that's the deal with the EPA handout. It's not about the temperature or tourism or snowfall or sea level or droughts or rainstorms or any of that stuff. Nothing to do with that. Now, let's be honest. They've added $10 trillion in debt in just 8 years. With $20 trillion in debt, really, what do you think is the first thing they're gonna cut funding on when the you-know-what hits the fan? It's probably gonna be Medicaid and Medicare, but the other thing is stupid programs like this. See, because they'll pull the rug out from under you in a heartbeat. And when they do, they're still going to expect you to pay for it. So now, you're not going to get the free money that's not free anymore. And you're going to have all the regulations you're going to have to follow. But you're going to have to completely fund it yourself. Isn't that fantastic? That's the deal.
Susan Olsen is next, and I'm going to give you a little warning. When I recorded this, I sound like I have a really horrible lisp. It's actually pretty amusing, but Susan does most of the talking, as she should, because she knows more about this and quite a few other things than I do. That conversation is next, right after a little nod to our friends at CNHT, who were so kind to allow us to use their space for a Grok Talk for 3.5 years. Hang in there, we'll be right back.
This is a coalition of New Hampshire taxpayers. We're located at 8 North Main in Concord, New Hampshire. This is a repository for all things conservative and municipal. So if you have a problem in your town, your school, your budget committee, the right to know law, and now the top of our list is voter fraud. You have a tip for us, some information for us, you want to join or help us out, cnht.org.
Hello.
Hey, Susan, it's Steve.
How are you?
Good. How you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
Great. Awesome. So, let's talk about Waterville Valley.
Waterloo Valley?
Waterloo Valley. I love that. That's fantastic. So, there's been a little chatter about that lately. We've had lies about local funding. We have questionable acquaintances, and you had a couple more pieces to the puzzle that you wanted to share.
Well, it's weird how all of this sort of came together at once. But I've got a little bit longer history with this. Late last year, I was looking around at who was going to be running for governor and who I thought might be sensible and not. And the first cull, of course, was baby Sununu. And I started going through the executive council records and the votes and whatnot. And it's fairly perfunctory. I mean, most of those guys there don't read the contracts and don't do the work. So I'm thinking, let's look at this. This kid is, 40 years old. He's all of a sudden decided that he's going to run for governor, and he's the head of this big ski resort, and Mr. Family Guy, and I'm thinking, maybe I'm going to go look around Waterville Valley and see if there's anything there that might be interesting. And I did, and the first thing I came across was something called the Green Peak Expansion. I mean, after I looked into the moderately tawdry history of Waterville Valley as a whole, you come across post-acquisition by the Sununus this proposal to expand the mountain, to add new trails and other things about skiing of which I know very little. But I didn't realize until that time that Waterville Valley Ski Resort is actually in a U.S. forest, and the Sununus, baby Sununu, holds what's called a special use permit. And the special use permit allows him now, as the new owners of this 40 and 50-year-old ski equipment, to, much like any federal royalty, you get to use the federal land in exchange for paying a part of your earnings back to them and maintaining the property and undertaking all sorts of, maintenance things to ensure that the federal land is kept in good shape. So I started looking at the special use permit. And it's, I think right now it's a 35 or 40-year permit. I should pull it out and talk to you about it. But what it does is it grants baby Sununu the right to operate ski lifts and various other things on federal land. It allows him to do some construction of equipment, some maintenance of equipment, all with permission granted by the Forest Service and compliance with any number of different regulatory schemes, whether it's USDA, which the Forest Service is part of, or EPA, clean water issues, things like that. So when Sununu picked up the property, he was transferred this special use permit, and I think he realized at the time that because all of the private land in Waterville Valley was owned by somebody else, that there was no opportunity to make any money off developing real estate like they're doing now at Loon and other places. The only way he can make money off this thing, it looks like, is lift tickets and fried dough. So the equipment there, nothing had been done to it in years and years and years. There hadn't even been a brand new condominium built on private land since 2006. So Chris goes to the Forest Service and says, look, I want to add this on. This has been part of what's called the master plan. You're familiar with that from the regional planning commissions. And in the master plan, it was always intended to move over and build these additional trails. So he submits it, and they do all the studies. Takes a couple of years. Forest Service comes back and grants him this expansion. So all of a sudden, he's got equipment and money in this. No, I'm kidding. He does nothing. Nothing happens on the expansion. They go out and cut down a tree or two and do lots of photo ops, and nothing happens. 2 years later, actually 2014, they submit a request for modification to the plan that would still have these additional trails and whatnot, but instead of buying a brand new spectacular state-of-the-art lift to move people from the resort, the bottom of the base, up to the various ski places, they said, you know what? we've got this called World Cup Triple that was installed in 1985 and was used for a while, but really was passed over by another lift that was built later. And gosh, then it was hit by lightning in 2000, so we kind of haven't used it. But we're going to rehab it. We're going to take it apart and move it over to Green Peak, and we're going to save a whole lot of money on this project. So I'm reading all this stuff, and again, back in November, I contacted the Forest Service to ask to look at the project files because what's on their site is incomplete. And I got nothing. Emails, phone calls, nothing. Until maybe the 1st of July. And I get an email from the new ski supervisor for the Forest Service who says, here are the files you requested. And I said, well, I would like the entire Waterville Valley file, and back and forth. And the short version is we made an appointment for me to go up and look in the files and see everything, right?
Okay.
So on August the 8th, I get in my little car and tootle myself up to Campton, exit 27, off of 93, and I sit in the office of this absolutely lovely young woman for about 3 hours. And she had been kind enough to put together a 3-ring binder and make some other copies. She let me sit next to her at her laptop and copied files electronically onto a big 16-gig flash drive that I bought to, not cut down any more trees than Chris needed to. So I walked out of there with 86 megs of files and 2 bundles of hard copies. And I come back and start looking at this stuff. Well, 8th of August, we go up and talk to this woman. And she was quite candid. She was relatively new. She'd come to New Hampshire from Vail, where she'd been one of the supervisors out there of those various projects. And they're pretty fancy schmancy and well-known and well-attended and well-developed. And she said she'd done it to bring her kids up in a more rural, quieter place. And she says, but she'd never dealt with anything quite like Waterville Valley before. And I was saying, well, what's going on? I mean, I can see where he wants to save money on the lift, and why is this not happening? I said, is he, just playing like he's going to add the expansion so he can add some value to it and sell it? I said, why is nothing going on? There hasn't been snow, so there haven't been construction constraints. And she says, well, frankly, she says for the project to go forward, there's a considerable number of trees that have to be cut for the trails and also the other, I think they call them glades. And I said, well, why hasn't he done that? She says, well, the Forest Service controls those contracts. We, being the Forest Service, let those contracts to private companies to come in and do the work in accordance with our stewardship requirements. We pay the guy because this is our land, and but it rolls into the value added into the project itself. And she says, but we haven't let the contract. And I said, why? She said, we've been after Waterville Valley for quite some time to take care of some pollution issues that they've got. Some sedimentation runoff from parking lots that haven't been managed since, dinosaurs walked the earth. And we were, this seems to be the only way that we can focus their attention. She says, now, the funny thing, she didn't say the funny thing, I'm paraphrasing, but she said, I came out from Vail, and nobody likes to, do the maintenance and the environmental work. She says they put it off as long as they can. She says, but they always have the money to do it. She says, not here. They don't have the money. Or they're not going to spend the money. She said, so we've been sort of keeping this contract at arm's length until we were assured that Mr. Sununu is going to fix these problems that we want, because these are fundamental to the infrastructure. It's nice to have expansions and things like that, but this is maintenance work that needs to be done. So, thinking, well, isn't that interesting? And, had a little chit-chat about her kids and this and that, and picked up my papers and rolled on back here to beautiful downtown Warner. And spent the next week or so going through the papers and whatnot. Of course, they wouldn't show me the actual financials in the royalty calculations for the permit fees, but it's pretty clear. They get a piece of the adjusted gross income, and that income comes from anything, whether it's lift tickets or fried dough or concessions or anything. Any money that's made from the ski resort is figured into the calculation for their fee. Now, bear in mind that lift tickets and fried dough are the primary revenue generators, but also Chris owns something called Town Square, which is the commercial district of Waterville Valley. It's a little, just like it sounds, square of buildings down at the one side of the mountain. You have to get there by car. It's a bit of a jog, but it's a little square thing, and 3 stories, and on the first floor some shops, and on the second and third floors are condos that may be owned or may be rented out. I don't really know all of them. But there's a T-shirt shop and a couple of restaurants, a little convenience store, post office, some empty offices. So I go around there before I left to take a look at that, because in my, somewhat checkered past, I'd done a lot of asset evaluations for clients who were looking either to acquire or to sell physical assets. And I thought, well, let's see what kind of shape this is. And there hadn't been snow, so they should be doing a lot of maintenance and upkeep and whatnot. And it was really quite sad. I mean, whether it was weeds growing through the cracks or rotted door frames or broken sidewalks or the great big entranceway that's covered with a tent-like thing, bleached almost white and looks like it'd been run through a pasta machine. Place is looking pretty ratty. So he's making money off the rents. He's the landlord to all of the businesses in Waterville Valley who may or may not be willing to talk about their experiences. But so he makes money off of rent. The Waterville Valley Town Square is not part of his special use permit, but it's the only other place where he can make money on this deal. So if there's no real estate to develop, because Cochran bought it all in '65 and sold it off here and there for condominium developments, there's nothing else to develop. So why in the world would you buy a run-down, ratty ski lift, if not for 2 things? One, to make yourself look like a boy wonder and Mr. New Hampshire, prepping yourself to run for higher office, or, as what contemporaneously came out with this, was maybe it's a kind of a bank thing. I don't know. But there's 2 fronts here. One is the fact that the town of Waterville Valley, which actually is held in thrall by Chris Sununu, ever since he bought it, the town property values, as figured by the Department of Revenue Administration, have dropped every year except one slight change. Their property taxes have gone up, except for 1 year for a 20-cent decrease. Their property taxes have gone up every year. Their values have gone down. They've been waiting on this guy to do something with the resort to make their lives better. And I ask myself the question, if Chris Sununu can't make life better for the 300 people he effectively holds in thrall, how in the world is he going to make life better for the 1.3 million people of New Hampshire? It doesn't make sense to me.
It's a good question. I know Kimberly asked it, and I think that, did you read WMUR had a story out today, and they were making some kind of noise about starting construction on the project? And
I went up yesterday.
You were there yesterday?
He had a 10 o'clock big announcement for everybody that they're announcing the start of construction for Waterville Valley. So I wasn't going to miss that. So I get in my little car, and I've got my little video camera, and I tootle on up to Waterville Valley and pull in, and it's raining, and walk up to the base of the lift. And you know what's interesting, when I was there on the 8th and driving around looking at the parking lots, the lady at the Forest Service told me that she thought she'd seen an excavator, so maybe they were fixing to start work. Well, the excavator was at the base of the mountain, and they put on this big show of using the excavator to knock down a building.
Mm-hmm.
That was going to house part of the new machinery. So now I know where the excavator went, because it didn't do the parking lots. So go up there, and Chris is there. There might be 24 people, I'd say. Half of them were staff or elected officials from the town, or a couple of Forest Service guys. There were looked like some residents, and maybe 3 or 4 media people. That was it. WMUR was there. NH1 was there. Some smaller press outlets, and yours truly. And Chrissy gets out there in the rain and says, you know, the day has finally arrived on the 31st of August that we're going to begin construction of the expansion of a major ski resort. So you ask the question, well, gee, really you start construction now? And how long is this going to take? And, you know, why didn't you start it when there was, you know, the summer and all of that? And he says, well, we just wanted to make sure, you know, that we had all our I's dotted and our T's crossed, and we had the funding to do this. Well, on the 8th of August, while the Forest Service does not have any approval rights over financing plans, the financing plans must show, like any project, on paper, that the money that's going to be expended is going to increase the revenue-generating capacity of the project itself. So, spending another $2 million on what was somewhere around a $10 million acquisition, we don't know what the value is now, except in looking at the tax returns of the Saffet Trust. We've seen that their original investment went up, and then it went back down. They're below their original investment now, and that's not in 2010 dollars. So the value has not increased, apparently, since 2010, and now they're going to dump another $2 million in it. And one thing you might be interested to know this, Steve. Waterville Valley's lift tickets and day passes are, for last season, let me get my paper here, I apologize. For a day trip at Waterville Valley, an adult lift ticket will cost about $77, which is 57% more expensive than the average lift ticket costs in the United States. An adult can get a season pass for $869, which is 82% more expensive than the average season pass in the United States. Now, I find that intriguing. I understand, you know, when when you're building widgets and you have fewer to sell because people aren't buying them, your fixed bonded indebtedness doesn't go away. So your unit price, unless you're willing to go broke, your unit price has to go up. But that's significant, 57% and 82% more expensive than ski resorts in the United States, and they're going to dump more money into it this year. I don't get it.
I'm curious.
I understand he gets Common Core math. I understand he supports that. But this doesn't make sense, even to funny banks.
I'm curious about the pollution issues, though. They claim to be starting on the project, but the Forest Service wouldn't let the contractors clear the trees until the pollution issues were resolved.
Well, the pollution, it was more of a carrot and stick.
Okay.
Apparently, they've been after Sununu, who is, by the way, allegedly an environmental engineer, to repair. There are, I believe, 7 parking lots around the entrance to the base and the lodge and whatnot. And they all look like Hiroshima. So you've got all of this sort of runoff from automobiles and sand and plowing into federal land and federal water bodies. And part of the special use permit requires compliance with the EPA clean water, which I'm not saying that it's right or wrong or good or bad.
Mm-hmm.
But this type of sediment and runoff was apparently not making the Forest Service happy. And they'd been asking for this to be fixed for quite some time. And unless this young lady was not telling me the truth, and I have no reason to believe she wasn't, that they were holding up granting of this tree cutting contract as a way to try and urge or cajole Chris into fixing these runoff issues. There are no silt fences up there that have been built. There's nothing. But all of a sudden, a couple of weeks after people are nosing around and asking questions, we've got the big reveal, and the Forest Service has released the contract. So is that pressure? Is that what? I don't know. I'm not privy to that, and you know, I'm just a little old lady that surmises things.
Sure.
But I, 1 and 1 equals 2 generally, and it seems just so specially coincidental.
It does. It really does.
I used to sell coal to some companies in France, and their U.S. representative prided himself on his English, and he was comfortable with slang and loved speaking English, and he loved telling jokes and using idioms. And one day, I forget where we were, but he says, Susan, he says, this supplier so-and-so down in Kentucky, he says, I think they're up to some hanky and some panky. And that just comes to mind when I'm looking at Waterville Valley.
Well, I bet there's probably an over-under somewhere on how much of this is all just a great big show, and once the primary's over or whatever happens, things will be different. I don't know. I just don't trust politicians, period.
Neither do I, but the folks in Waterville Valley don't have any place to go. They can't fix this.
Right.
They're stuck. The guys that rent these little shops in this town square, the only reason that you'd ever go there to the town square is if the whole facility. Sununu sold the golf course last year.
Yeah.
Peeled that off. There were 2 holes on that 9-hole course that were unplayable. So I don't know, is he selling off assets to raise money? I don't know. But there are people here who are depending on him, who have no other place to go.
Well, it doesn't sound like
he's
it doesn't sound like he's been a terribly good steward for these folks.
Yeah, and that to me says a lot about character.
I agree.
You know, I get lying politicians. I understand that. But these people are, in effect, his property. This is the plantation that Sununu built. And these folks are not being treated very well. And although they run their town very efficiently, they squeeze their pennies into copper wire, and they run a nice little municipal set of services. But they have no place else to go.
Well, it's not a great place for them to be, that's for sure, and it doesn't sound like Mr. Sununu is doing them any favors. We got about a minute.
I appreciate you giving me a call. I find all of this taken together really interesting.
It is, and I think there's plenty of more interesting things for us to find out, and hopefully we'll find out.
I got 86 megs to go through still.
Oh, Lord. All right, well, as you uncover things, you let us know what you discover.
I shall.
All right, thanks so much for taking time to talk.
Anytime, Steve.
All
Thanks.
right. See you, Susan.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Our thanks again to Susan Olsen for taking a good half hour to talk to us about the situation in Waterville Valley, things that you will not probably hear or read anywhere else. We're happy to have that for you. A few quick local notes. Opioid deaths in Manchester are down, on the decline. Lots of people taking credit, and plenty of reason why they should. Check out that story at WMUR.com. It's Labor Day weekend. Sunday or Monday, we could be getting a rainstorm, a big one, named Hermione. Hermione is a tropical storm / hurricane / tropical storm that has been wandering around the Gulf of Mexico and has now hit land in Florida. The track could bring it up to seaboard, could bring it out into the Atlantic, could bend it back in, and we could be seeing some of that on Sunday or Monday night. So if you're planning on a cookout or any other outdoor activities on the Sunday or Monday of our long 3-day weekend, for those of you who have the days off, be careful or your wieners are going to get wet. So make sure you plan ahead and be careful if it's really windy out. Here's a cheery little national note for you from personalliberty.com. Department of Defense Inspector General's office revealed a little more than a year ago that DoD employees used government credit cards for millions of dollars in personal charges, including visits to casinos, bars, and strip clubs. The IG this week announced that taxpayers are still footing the bill for similar expenditures. According to the audit, the Air Force was the biggest source of casino and strip club charges on government-issued cards, with more than $400,000 in charges. The Army came in second, tallying $350,000. Oh, come on, Army. Let's go. More than a year later, the IG has followed up on its investigation only to find that the DoD hasn't taken appropriate steps to curb a taxpayer abuse. We determined that DoD management, cardholders, commander or supervisor, and travel card officials did not take appropriate action when notified by the DoD OIG during the previous audit. The cardholders had potentially misused their travel card, the IG writes. Specifically, DoD management and travel card officials did not perform adequate reviews for the cardholders reviewed and did not take action to eliminate additional misuse. Judicial Watch, which initially reported the IG's latest findings, noted that DoD officials remained unlikely to correct the problem. It's astounding that more than a year after this atrocious behavior was exposed by a federal investigation, no action has been taken. Worse yet, it appears that little will change because the Pentagon's Deputy Secretary for Military Personnel Policy seems dismissive, noting that personal use identified in the report amounted to less than 0.04% of the total travel card spending and less than 0.03% of the total transaction volume. So there you go. No big deal. It's not that much of your money, right? Stop complaining. Kevin Landrigan writing in the Union Leader about candidates who are or are not taking the Coalition of New Hampshire Taxpayers taxpayer pledge. That's the pledge to not pass any sales or income taxes at the state level, no broad-based taxes. Republican primary candidate Donald Winterton, who is running in State Senate District 16, refuses to take any pledges. He's not really trying to put himself in a political box. This is a Republican primary candidate, and quote-unquote, if you don't like it, find somebody else. Donald Winterton. He also says he's too old to do this dance to try to make everyone happy. That's an interesting thing for somebody who's supposed to be a representative to say. Donald has a primary candidate in State Senate District 16. His name is Joe Duarte, or Duarte, I don't know how to pronounce it, Joe, I'm sorry. I apologize if I got it wrong. He would be the somebody else that Donald is referring to. Joe has signed the taxpayer pledge, and he accepts basically, I guess, the premise that it's your money, not the government's money, and if you elect him, he feels an obligation to ensure that you get to keep as much of it as possible. So much so that he has signed the CNHT taxpayer pledge. He will vote against any statewide sales or income tax. All right, that wraps up our first maiden miss voyage on the new podcast experiment. We hope you enjoyed it. We'll be back next week with some new stuff, and we'll keep trying things till we get it all worked out. Thanks for listening. Have a great weekend.